Well, a harrowing report by Four Corners has lifted the lid on the frightening reality of child influencers and the dangers associated with being an online personality.
Yeah, so what's behind the rise of kid influencers, and are parents to blame? Child psychologist Charlotte Keating joins us live. Charlotte, good morning to you. Good to see you. What do you think is driving the popularity of these child influencers?
Look, I think when it comes to child influencers, we've got to take child influencer for what it's worth, and sometimes influencing can be for the greater good. It can be for a positive purpose. We think about people like Greta Thunberg, who's taken a generation with her, but I think what we're talking about at the moment is different to that. I think what we are talking about is children tending to follow in the footsteps of their parents, who I think in the most part are trying to create commercial opportunities for their children. And I think parents really have to ask themselves, you know, what is the potential impact of doing this on my children? Is it really for my children that I'm doing this? Is it to showcase their passions, their capacities and interests? Or is there something else at play?
This is an issue that we've been talking about for some time. 60 Minutes also did a piece yesterday on the impact social media just in itself has on the youth, finding that young girls are most at risk of social harm and things like that. If you've got children who are influencing sort of almost as a career at the moment online, surely that doesn't necessarily bode well for their mental health. I mean, even if it is something innocent, their lives are being lived and portrayed online.
Look, you're right, Sarah, and I think there really are some significant harms to be very mindful of if you are considering having one of these accounts for, for your children. Effectively, there's the potential for exploitation, whether a parent is aware of it or not necessarily aware of it, quite aside from the financial, promotion of their children. There's predators out there, that potentially can see what they're doing. You don't know what happens with the photos, but beyond that, as you say, there's the potential impact on their identity development. They're spending an awful lot of time producing content and really sort of driving their attention toward this online presence. How is that impacting their opportunity for sort of authentic friendship developments outside, the opportunity to do everyday activities that are outside social media?
Well, my kid's 5. My girls are 5 years old. I don't want them to have a phone until they're 18. But I know that's not going to happen.
You could try.
I could try. But look, the other harmful impacts, Charlotte, that this will have?
Look, definitely, and I think, that's something really to be very considered of in terms of the harms. And I think, for parents, you really have to ask yourself the questions, what is it that they're actually going to be on there for? Is it for their benefit? Is it for my benefit? How is it potentially going to impact their, opportunities, as I said before, to make, positive friendships? And really, you have to weigh as a parent, what is the value to the child relative to the potential risk that may be here, and what can you do to prevent those risks? What can you really do to protect your child from them? There's a lot of conversation about consent and whether young children can consent, and I just want to really reinforce, children cannot consent. A 7-year-old cannot consent. We don't let children less than 16 in most situations consent. Their brains are not developed for it. They cannot possibly fathom or perceive the kind of risks and protections that are necessary for them. That's what parents' jobs is.
I mean, I'm inclined to think the way Alex does, just don't give kids phones, right? Or don't give them access to social media. But the reality is that's the world they are growing up in right now. Not one that we grew up in. We turned out okay, I think, some of us, relatively speaking. But it is part of the fabric of adolescence these days. So what do you do about that?
That's absolutely right. It is part of the fabric of adolescence, and I can completely understand the push to keep young people safer for longer, but I think we cannot sort of take a step backwards from the importance of parents knowing exactly what their children are doing online and being really cautious and conservative about knowing what the risks are and being very collaborative with their kids about that too, rather than just hoping that there might be, sort of later rules and requirements for kids to be online. It's not really a safeguard.
Yeah, and putting photos of kids up online as well. We put a lot of our photos up of kids on our Instagram pages, for example. Is that always a good idea? Are there risks involved with that? Should we be doing that?
I think, each family is to decide for themselves, but I think it's really important to consider that if you have a public account, effectively there is no difference between a child's internet or an adult's internet. The child or their content photos is entering into an adult world with all of the risks that exist. And so you have to be very cautious.
Absolutely. All right, Doc, as always, thank you so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Hey there, Today fans. Sarah and...
What's my name again?
Oh my goodness, Carl.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel, though. Subscribe now for more news, special reports and amazing Aussie stories.
And Carl misbehaving,
Whoa,
of course.
That never happens.
Always happens.
What's she talking about?